Hey guys, Darrell Keezer here from Candybox Marketing. This month, I want to share with you a quick video where I speak to Jerry Agar from Newstalk 1010 about the importance of making your website accessible for people with disabilities. Last month, I did a quick 5-minute explainer video of checking how and if your website is accessible. And during this talk, we talked about government controls versus the private sector trying to make this world a better place. Take a listen.
Good to have you along. Business people in Ontario may be scrambling to keep up with new regulation that came in as of January 1st, and it requires that websites be accessible. What does all of that mean? How big an issue is this going to be? How big an issue is it actually? Darrell Keezer joins me now, founder and CEO, Candybox Marketing. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Jerry.
What do they mean, accessible website?
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people are scrambling to figure out right now. And so accessibility is essentially for people with disabilities. The official term is Accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Act, so AODA. If you're a business owner, you've probably heard that this year. And so that it means that somebody that has like a visual impairment, anything from color blindness to, being completely blind, over to even, being hearing impaired, being deaf, that they can still access all the information on your website. So this goes into anything from if you have a video explaining how to open up a bank account, that it's either got subtitles and that you're not dependent on, people being able to see or hear things to be able to access the information on your website.
Why is this the government's business to tell people how to run their business? If a business wants to suffer whatever loss they will suffer for not having that accessibility and people going elsewhere to do their business, a different bank or whatever the case may be, I don't understand this at all.
Yeah, well, think of it like this. I mean, years ago, we were pretty lax in regards to how we built buildings. And so businesses could open up, let's say, an office building and not have an elevator to the, second, third, or fourth floor. So that automatically disqualifies anybody in a wheelchair from accessing that entire industry of jobs. And you're right. It's like, that's bad for the business. But, the government has been putting in mandates and saying, well, if we are requiring people, and think of, this year in particular, if we're requiring people to go online to do things, so apply for a job, get medication, do these different things, well, then we really need these same companies to help the entire population, not just people without disabilities, to be able to do that. So if you're trying to, let's just say, apply for a job and somebody says we are an equal opportunity employer, but then the website is not accessible for people that have a visual impairment, well, you're not really an equal opportunity employer. You're kind of locking the door for anybody that has a disability.
I thought, though, that there were, regarding websites, we're not talking about ramps into buildings and stuff like that. We're talking about technical stuff. I thought there were apps and various things online that actually could help people who are visually impaired or have hearing issues, whatever it might be.
So you're partially correct, Jerry. You're right. There are apps out there that like screen readers, but just as an example, your screen reader can only read text, right? So like, let's just say if you've got an image saying apply here, but that apply here button is just an image and it's not text. So that's against the standard. Now, an accessibility tool cannot read an image. It can only read text. And so although it's very we are literally building websites using these standards so that their visual aids or their audio aids can actually do it. A lot of websites are not set up that these things can even work. So it's kind of like it requires both. It requires that person to have a screen reader, which they would have, but then your website needs to do certain things so that the screen reader can access it.
The new regulations require all companies with 50 or more employees and educational institutions to make their corporate websites Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act compliant. What is this likely to cost a company?
Now, the fines are really steep.
No, I don't mean the fines. We'll get to that in a minute. What would it cost to fix up your website?
Yeah, and so we've been dealing with projects. Most of our days are filled with doing diagnostics on websites. If it's a tiny little site, it could be $1,000 or so. But I mean, some sites are 1,000 pages. They need to be completely redesigned. And even think of it like this, Jerry. Like this is not just like some back end nerdy coding. Like even in regards to how your website functions. Has to go along with accessibility. So it could be in the tens of thousands if your website has been built incorrectly or designed incorrectly. So accessibility is more than just like coding some stuff in the back. It's really taking a look at the entire site and saying, is this accessible? Now, imagine if you were recruiting people and you have PDFs for download. You've got 1,000 PDFs. Well, PDFs also need to be accessible. So if it's taking you an hour per PDF, well, that's 1,000 hours, right? So it could be very little, but it could be a lot if a business depends on that to be accessible.
All right. So I'm talking to Darrell Keezer of Candybox Marketing, and somebody named Vince sends a text message. I sell cars. Do I need to have my website accessible for blind people? I'm assuming they aren't driving.
So, and that's the common misconception where they always think about the consumer, right? So if you sell cars to consumers and you've got less than 50 employees, no, you don't need to have an accessible website. But if you employ as a car like dealership, 50 or more employees, don't just think about your customers, but think about hiring somebody. So if you're saying, well, we're an equal opportunity employer, we've got over 50 people and we're a job place, and you could technically hire somebody with a visual or a hearing impairment, then yes, absolutely. You do, or under the new government standards, you do need to be accessible. So it is, we are still meeting those benchmarks of, 50 more employees, an educational institution, which we should all have access to, or obviously government. And those are the areas that the government is going after right now. But I imagine that they'll start lessening the number of employees so that more websites are accessible.
I know that some people get frustrated when I appear to push back against this, but I push back because I know that government can be entirely unreasonable in these areas. And one example I knew was people building out an office, and they weren't a public-facing office. They were there to support business. Meetings took place almost exclusively at the client's offices, etc. And then somebody comes in and is an inspector and says, well, you don't have this, and you don't have that, and you don't have this. Somebody comes in a wheelchair, there's no place for them to hang up their coat, and they say, well, in the incredibly unlikely circumstance that somebody will come in here in a wheelchair, we'll hang their coat up for them. Nope, not good enough. Nope, you've got to follow the rules. There's no reason in common sense behind inspectors and government operatives when we do these kinds of things.
Yeah, I can see that it's really hard on businesses. We know a lot of our customers, it's an investment, right? Like you've got to put money forward to be able to invest and get this. Now, on the other side, some companies are seeing it as a bit of an opportunity because most websites, and when I say most, there's not we'd have to scour the entire web and do a huge audit to figure this out. But I would easily say 95% of businesses are not accessible. And now how many of those should be is a different question. But if you think about it this way, there's about 5% of the Canadian population that doesn't have or that has hearing impairments. Another 5% has visual impairments. And so you got about 10% of the population with some type of impairment that would prohibit them from either buying something on your website or applying for a job. So some businesses are seeing it as a bit of an advantage and saying, if we are the only business out there with our competition that allows people to order online, especially this year, that have a visual or hearing impairment, well, that's a huge advantage to us because our competition isn't doing it.
Yeah,
so
that's why I think the marketplace eventually solves problems better than the government does. I'm going to run out of time, but let me ask you this, Darrell. Are the government websites accessible? I can't figure them out.
Yeah. Now, accessibility is not always in the same vein of usability, right? So we, trying to find something on Canada.ca can be frustrating, but yes, their websites are accessible. They've known about these laws for about 15 years, but we're still also trying to define what these laws look like. There's a lot of areas of gray with accessibility. And so we're all trying to figure it out. And so, yeah, right now we're doing free consultations, and it takes about half an hour to an hour for us to walk through a website. And some things is kind of like, okay, we could change it or we could leave it, but we're figuring this out all the time. So most companies these days are just contacting us for audits.
It is now the law that your website, if you have more than 50 employees, be accessible. Darrell Keezer from Candybox Marketing. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much for listening to this interview. Feel free to join us on YouTube and comment on this video if you've got any suggestions or anything to add to the conversation.